What is going on, everybody? It's your host with the most, ForexFunded, coming at you with another weekly analysis for gold for this upcoming week, November 16th, 2025. As always, links in the description. Join our free Discord. Get involved with our PAMM, or PAM, whatever you want to call it. We be doing numbers, sometimes 30, 40, 50% a week. It depends on the week. So let's jump right into it. So if you guys watched our last week analysis, we were expecting price to rally up towards the 50 fib, right? Right about here. Not gonna lie, we were expecting a sell off from there, but we didn't get that. We traveled up even higher. That's okay. We had a absolutely killer week. We made over 1,500 pips, and that includes the losses that we took, because we know we did take some losses. Not everybody, nobody and their mother is winning every single trade. So let's dive into these charts and let's see what we can get from them. So starting here on the weekly, there is, not much to see. Kind of a big rejection, I won't lie. However, it's not from any of the areas that I was expecting, right? So as I mentioned, the first area that I was really going to be expecting was that 50 fib, because it would have kept that nice bearish structure to continue down towards our 38.55. You can see we broke 61 fib by a sufficient amount, right? So for me, that means they really do want to go up to 7.8, right? So that's kind of how I'm feeling from the weekly, is the fact that we want to go up towards 78%, right? So we can get rid of that fib. Looking here on the daily, from our daily lows to our daily highs, we can see that here on Friday with that massive sell-off, we ended up tapping our 60 fib, 61 fib, our daily 21 EMA, and the prior resistance, and we got a big rejection. So as we all know, that's a triple confluence zone. So you're bound to see something like that unless the true intentions is to go lower. Does that mean the market's going to open up this week and we're going to shoot back up towards, 7-8%? Or is this sufficient enough pullback for them to test the 50 fib, the 50 bullish fib, right? So as we know, this 50 bullish fib is what I was expecting before the next FOMC in December, right? We're probably going to cut rates again. So this is a good zone that I'm looking at to resume the true bull on gold, right? So we're gonna have to. That's the biggest thing for this week. Is this the high that they're sufficient enough with? Because if we're talking technically, right, this is a lower high. So what we're gonna want to see this week is, are we gonna crash down and break these lows, confirming the the bearish price action, or is this just all pullback to continue up towards here? Right? Now, obviously, by the time they break these lows, that confirmation that we're bearish is, it's too late, which means we're going to have to go down to lower time frames and look for further clues that we can hop into some sells, right? Going over here to 4-hour, we can see, the respect for 61 and us trying to hold this 50 fib. So for me, that prior low is going to be a big determining factor. That is probably going to be about the first real nice bearish confirmation, right? If we're able to break and close below that low on 4-hour, we probably are going to end up breaking this higher low and this higher low to attack 50 and possibly that 61%, right? So with that being said, if we open up and we just break down, I would look to get some pullback and resume downward, right? So that's a big major range point right there at 40.55. As you guys see, we basically played in between range point to range point last week. So can we do the same thing, whether it be the range point to the range point, or can it be range point to range point? Now, on the bullish side, if we end up opening up nice and bullish and we take out this high, I'm going to look for price to come up towards 31.35 range point. Look for a little bit of pullback and look to continue up higher, right? We don't really need that fib anymore because we're going to want to have our eyes on the bearish fib, right? So okay, so before we talk about the current bearish fib, let's talk about the prior bearish fib. We'll go down to a lower time frame too. We'll go back there. Don't worry. So after we ended up breaking the structure, the internal structure, if you guys watched the market video, the internal structure right here of these lows breaking, we pulled back perfectly to 61. So that, was giving out really nice sells. We were in buys from over here. We were expecting higher, but, break even got hit after about 250 pips. That's why it's important to take partials. Reason I didn't really take big partials is we ended up breaking this prior internal lower high. So I was expecting price to come up higher, but it didn't, right? That's part of the game. So that's why I say, now we're looking at the fib from that high to the low, right? This high to the low. So if we do get that bullish push up, we're going to want to not have a rejection from our golden zone. If you have a rejection from that golden zone, that can get really scary, right? Because that can signal that you do want to go lower. So you're going to want to keep that in mind, right? Okay, that looks disgusting. Let me make that better, right? If you get a rejection from your golden zone, you might want to look at sells. It really just depends on the structure that we're getting. So yeah, that's about all I could say from 4 hour. The way I look at it, yes, these are higher lows, but to me, this is one move, right? So the higher lows we're going to want to look at are going to be these right here. So once you end up breaking 39.65, you're almost guaranteed to get a fresh low. Going back to that 1 hour to see what we have. If you do break it down further, right, gold is a big fan of those W reversals, right? That would mean we want to try to tap into 61 to 50%. We could also look for, market could open a little bit bearish to make a daily wick, and then you could still climb higher, right? So with that being said, let's add a zone in that golden zone, because that will be, if we get that bullish pressure, that will be a big fighting zone to kind of determine, do we want to go lower or do we want to go higher? Once we get out of that golden zone, we're likely going to test the highs. But if we reject it, we're likely going to break lower, right? Y'all understand what I'm saying? I know there's a lot of fucking lines on this chart. It can get a little confusing, but that's why it's important to watch the videos. So with that being said, that's about all I can break down for you guys. We could take a look at the 15 and see what happened, but there's really not much that happened here, right? End of the day, after we had this pullback, it was just slow sideways. But the fact that we ended up protecting that 61, that big 61, and that resistance level, it does kind of hint to me that we want bullish. But you guys know how gold's been in the past, month. Gold has been very, very volatile. So anything can happen, and you just need to be prepared for that, right? Proper risk management saves you. If you were in our Discord, we were up about 1,700 pips this week, and then we had I think it was 4 trades in a row that we lost for about 300 pips, and then we bounced back with a 250 pip buy. So you got to have good risk management, because you can make those 1,600 pips, but then if you're using crazy risk and you can't take a 300 pip, 400 pip loss, you're done, right? And unfortunately, we saw that happen to several people this week. They were going big on the buys, and then just kept going big whole week, and then they can't, their account can't hold a little bit of drawdown, and boom, they lose it. Me personally, I was up 4.4% on prop firms, and I ended up ending the week around 2.5, right? So I lost 2%. But if you really think about it, did you really lose 2% if it was only gains for the week? So that's what I'm going to leave you guys with for this week. Hope you had a wonderful weekend, and hope you guys have a great week in the markets.